Strategy Show. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare, joined as always on this Friday by Sean Newsham, PSU Fans 2. We are changing up the topic a little bit this week. We had this idea, we were going to do it last week, but it felt a little rushed, so we're going to do it this week. But we are going to try to build a 5 ETH gallery from scratch today. And Sean and I have talked a little bit about it, but we really are going in pretty much from scratch. And so, Sean, like I said, we were talking a little bit about it. I think this is going to be a little harder than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to be a little bit more difficult than we anticipated. We're just going to have to make adjustments. The plan for us today is, I know Laird's talked a lot about himself recently, me, myself, and Laird. So we're trying to do a more open show this week where we talk about building a pure gallery.
Other people, yeah,
that are on a smaller budget can gain a lot out of it. So the plan for us was sort of to go into this without having much preparation, because we want to sort of plan it how we would do it if we were looking at things for the first time too. Now, granted, obviously we're going to have our knowledge with what we've seen with players who we're familiar with and stuff like that. So we're going to use that, but we're going to pretty much start from ground zero. We're going to make adjustments as we go. We're going to probably put people in and then remove them at a later time as well.
Yeah, basically that's kind of how we wanted to build it. We didn't want to do too much ahead of time because it just didn't seem like it was all that helpful. If we were like, oh, we did this and then we noticed this, and so we had to change it. We'd actually like to show you guys how we would go about doing this. And particularly, we're going to spend pretty much the entire time on SorareData. So it's going to be a little bit more of a visual episode today, probably. So we'll try to detail as much as we can for those listening to the audio version of this podcast. But so pretty much the only thing that Sean and I really discussed was how much, basically where we were going to target. We wanted to be very specific here that building a 5 ETH gallery today which is March 11th, 2022, is different. The strategies that you would take to build a gallery are going to be different on March 11th, as opposed to June 11th, as opposed to September 11th and December 11th. The time of year really matters because of the schedule that all of these soccer leagues use. And so we're probably not diving much into Europe, you'll notice today, because those seasons are getting close to finishing, and we're obviously right in the beginning of MLS and J League and K Leagues and League MX, all the other America leagues. So it's going to be heavy on that kind of information, because if we are starting today and we want to play SO5, and that's kind of the point, Sean and I think playing SO5 is the best way to kind of grow the value of your galleries, then these are kind of the players that we have to go for.
Yeah, and so a couple of the notes for today. First of all, I think this is very helpful for anyone with 20 ETH gallery. You can pick a lot of stuff out of this that would be helpful for you too, because I think at that point you're going to be obviously a bigger gallery, but you're still going to be building some depth. You might be at a slightly different stage than what this gallery would be at, but same sort of theory behind it. And then what we're going to do with pricing, we're going to try to be realistic. So if a floor price is 0.2, but we're pretty sure we could get the card for, let's say, 0.175, that's going to be what price we're going to use. Similarly, if we think the card is 0.2 ETH and it's listed at 0.2 ETH, we're going to say it's going to be 0.2 ETH. So we're going to try to be realistic with those things as well. And then we're going to, like I said, we're going to move things in and out. We're going to work our way through things and sort of build as we go, which will also involve removing cards as we go, because we realize we don't have the funds to have all of the cards.
Right. Yeah. That was one of the things that when we started briefly looking, it was kind of less that cards were more expensive than we thought they were. And granted, Sean and I are obviously not in the starting from scratch phase of our own galleries. And so there are some players, basically a lot of the players that we're looking for today are not necessarily ones that we would be purchasing ourselves for our galleries, just because of where we are on the platform. But I think there's just a lot of strategies that we implement in our own SO5 gallery, or our own Sorare galleries, that are beneficial for others. And so we wanted to talk about that. This is also not going to be a one-time thing. It's not going to be an every week thing, but we're going to try to do these types of shows if this turns out to not be a disaster. Then we're going to do different budgets and different times of the year, so that you can go back. But there's a lot of the strategies we use today are going to be used in future ones. It's just the numbers are going to be a little different, or maybe the players are because of the time of year. So, Sean, you have the SorareData website open, and obviously it shows the next auctions with a bunch of limited cards. Tell everyone how many limited cards we plan on buying today.
0. Won't consider any reasons for it from my perspective, and then I'll let Laird give his because he has dabbled a bit more in the limited way of things than I have. So I will say, if you want to be a trader, this show is going to be purely based on like we're trying to compete in SO5 and we're trying to generate from an SO5 perspective. If you're trading cards, I think limited is the best place to go. It's the most liquid, and you can find cards in the limited variety that maybe will 2 or 3x if you get the right situation. Now, I've had trades that have been successful in the limited variety. I've also had trades that have failed in the limited variety. So this isn't going to be a trader show. And for us, from our perspective, I view limiteds as the cheap entry point, which is good. There's going to be a cheap entry point, and at some point they're going to turn into like a middle tier entry point when we get to a new scarcity level. But I think eventually you're going to get priced out of rares, super rares, uniques. And if you're getting a 5 ETH gallery, you're likely already priced out of uniques and most super rares. So if we go in and we're just buying limiteds here now, we have no chance to progress to Division 3 ever realistically, because we just aren't going to have the funds to move to Division 4, which is for a gallery of this size the most important. Getting a 0.02 ETH threshold and 0.01 ETH threshold is the most important thing, which we'll talk about as we go. And also, like, your ability to progress to Division 3 is valuable and viable via this strategy. Whereas if you're strictly buying limiteds, you are going to sort of strap yourself and you have no ability to move up because the limited cards cannot be used in any other division, whereas rares can be used in Division 3, 2, and 4. So that's why I think that limiteds are not the way you go if you're building a smaller gallery. Laird, what do you think in the limited market as well, since you've dabbled more there than I have?
Yeah, I think the time of year is the reason why I didn't push buying limiteds. Like, I don't necessarily think buying limiteds is bad at this budget, but given where we are right now, the European seasons the European leagues have, let's call it 10 to 12 games left, and then the summer break. And I think the difficulty with starting now and buying limiteds is that the star tier and tier 1 limited upside in America and Asia is just not nearly as high in terms of selling them for profit, for good gains, than it is getting the European ones. And so if you can start winning limited rewards immediately, then that's fine for 10 game weeks. And then you're kind of dead if you focus exclusively on Europe or heavily on Europe. And it's not, 5 ETH gallery is not enough or 5 ETH budget, is not enough to get kind of dominant limited teams and still be able to compete enough in rare to set you up to progress to rare pro, which Sean keeps calling D4 and D3.
Oh, my bad. It's such a better name. It is such a better name than what it is now.
Regardless. But basically that's the reason that, like, I didn't feel like it was necessary to push limited now. Like, if this was July or August, I would feel differently. It would also give us kind of a better idea of where the number of cards that they've been selling that we get to. Like, we're still kind of in the low hundreds now of the 1,000 that they can mint for limited cards. And basically winning a star limited card in June is not nearly as valuable as winning a star limited in October. And so, because of the time frame where we are, ideally we can turn this 5 ETH gallery into more, and then you could still, if you want to get into limiteds when the star cards are more valuable, then you can do that. But basically at this point in time, it just doesn't seem like there's enough short-term upside in limiteds based on our gallery size, as opposed to just investing in rares. So that was it. So apologies for everybody who wanted to come in thinking they were getting limiteds.
Exactly. And some note, this is not going to be a limited show for the reasons Laird talked about. Not saying down the road that limiteds might not be an option or a path you would go down, but I don't think it is at this stage. And I realistically, I just don't view limiteds as the best options that you could spend your funds on at the moment. So anyways, going into things, we're going to, first of all, I know you talked about Challenger Europe and you Champ Europe in general and how we're not going to be going to Europe. How much consideration will we be giving to Champ Europe in the event this was in June?
None.
None. There would not be. So this is a big mistake that people make. If you are buying Champ Europe cards, your gallery should be probably 50 to 100 ETH gallery. If you want to play SO5. The reason for this is you're just not going to be competitive on a small budget, and your cards are just not going to be good enough on that budget. So you're going to pay a lot more for a lot worse cards than you can get elsewhere. So in general, like speaking, if our gallery was like if we were doing a 50 ETH gallery budget here, which I believe we hopefully would want to do. I think Laird talked about it. I think we would maybe like to do this maybe once a month and have different budgets. Like we would do like a 50 ETH gallery, 100 ETH gallery, 250 ETH gallery, maybe even a 1 ETH gallery that would take us a little bit of time instead of a full show to do. So that's what we're thoughts on Europe. We would look more at the Challenger. So I guess the first thing to do is commons. So when you're setting up your account, you get packs of commons based on what your favorite teams are. This might be different than what our strategy is going to be going forward, but what would you recommend setting your teams for that, and why are you setting that as your teams?
Yeah, so it's a little weird. I'm actually going to address a question first from Mike Basson, who was asking if an additional count has been set up for this project. Sean and I talked about it, and the answer is no. We did not set up another account for this because one of us cannot run two accounts.
Correct. And we also would like to say that we would love to. We would love to have a SorareData Road to Glory account where we can sort of track how it does, but we decided it was not in anyone's best interest to do that.
Correct. Right. So to be clear, no, so that, I mean, think of that however you want, but like we are going to talk about specific cards that we would buy based off of the prices that we're going to see in the market. We are not buying these cards. We're not telling everybody else to buy these cards. But that's Sean's pump of the week will come at another time. Don't worry. But so I want to be very clear about that first. This is just like what we would do. So there's no reason to necessarily just trail it just because. Anyway, so I don't even remember what the question. Oh, the comments. Yes. So it's set up very much like, who are your favorite teams? And never pick your favorite teams unless your favorite teams are like the best teams, which I guess is theoretically possible. But what we want to do is be able to get good commons, or really just a good common goalkeeper for our all-star rare team, which we would like to build that competes for cards, but it's really for threshold. And so if that's the case, then you want to pick kind of the best teams from America and Asia, because those are the ones that are going to be more helpful throughout the summer. And Sean, before I jump in, like Brazil obviously doesn't start for another month or so. We know how good Mineiro was. Everson is their goalkeeper. Would you consider a Mineiro as one of your favorite teams, or do you go with like River Plate, or do you go with MLS, somebody in MLS, or do you go with Yokohama Marinos? Like, where would you think you'd go?
So realistically speaking, which we'll talk about as we go, we're going to want to centralize and focus on certain leagues. I do think going with Mineiro does make some sense. However, I think another idea you want to do here is, and this will go in the future, maybe not what we're doing today, you're going to want a U23. So I think you're going to want to either make like Shonan Belmar a option, or I think you're going to want like Chicago Fire as an option, or one of those teams. What do you think on that?
The idea of choosing Chicago Fire is crazy, but it makes sense. That being said, I'm just not sure the viability of like entering U23 teams with a common is worth it. And I think we also want to be clear that this plan is not to use a common goalkeeper in every region we enter. Like, we are budgeting for rare goalkeepers, but at least in all-star rare, where we have the threshold, we may be able to save a little bit there with the goalkeeper. But I don't know. I think I'm more willing to try to go with Marinos or Mineiro or River Plate or even the Seattle Sounders to get Fry. Like I would rather a goalie who's more likely to get 60 to then turn into 30 as opposed to just because he's young and can help us get into U23. That's all.
Yeah, I think what I would do is I would choose one. I would probably choose like Marinos. I'd probably choose Yokohama F Marinos and get Takawaka. And then I would probably choose a U23 goalie. And I would probably choose an American one. So I'd probably go with like Chicago Fire. The reason for that is I do agree.
Vancouver also an option.
Or Vancouver. Yeah, I think Vancouver might be the best option because I don't think Hazel leaves, whereas Slonina might leave. So the idea isn't to definitively be able to use one of U23, but I want that option in the event that we get there eventually. And JMO10 talked about thresholds disappearing stuff. We don't know what they're going to do. So this is we're going to plan on what things are like today, but they could change. Do you agree with that, Laird?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think end of March, which is this current month, is when we were supposed to get updates on something. I can't even keep track of what is supposed to be announced this month, but I wouldn't expect them to make any changes that are effective before the next European season. So we'd still have all summer to theoretically collect thresholds in order to get us to the fall. So I'm acting as if it's staying for now, and frankly, whatever comes from, comes out of, or whatever the threshold turns into, I think it will still be set up competitively, because I don't think they will make such a drastic change that people who have built threshold teams are now dead in the water for whatever they want to do next.
Yeah, I agree with that. So another thing that I think people make a major mistake in doing when creating galleries or creating teams on a budget is they don't prioritize one league. And Laird, why don't you talk a little bit about why prioritizing within leagues is an important factor?
Yeah, so we kind of briefly talked about stacking, like you and I before this, and like whether we should stack. And like that's a popular strategy that a lot of people use. We've talked about it a bunch. And we kind of like decided that stacking isn't required. Like you don't have to have 3 or 4 or 5 guys from the same team, but having 3 or basically having all of your guys from the same league ensures as much as you can that they all play around the same time. Because we do get some midweek fixtures from MLS and K League and J League, but the whole league doesn't always play. But that on an MLS weekend, if you have all MLS cards, then they're going to play. And sometimes if you're starting to mix where you have guys from Major League Soccer, some from Liga MX, some from Argentina Superliga, they may not always play. And the last thing you want to do is have a bunch of cards that don't make up a lineup. And so, as Josh said in chat here, there are just fewer dead game weeks if you have all players from the same league. And I'm talking about the same region. This isn't let me get everybody from the America region for my all-star team. We actually mean specific domestic league. If you have 5 guys from the same league, there's a very high chance that they're all going to play at the same time. And as we've all learned, having players that play is the most important thing on Sorare.
Exactly. And speaking of that, we're not going to fully do that if it makes sense to go outside the budget to do so. But like Laird talked about, you buy Mexican League players versus MLS players, and the Mexican League sits and doesn't play in June at all. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you just can't build lineups in June because of that. That's not what you're going for with a gallery of this size. Right. So that's not where we're going to go. So from a perspective of how we're going to build today, I think we both agree that we want to look at America, precisely MLS, and Asia with Japan being the focus. The reason for these two, one, for both of us, we're most familiar with these 2 leagues. Korea is a bit more of an issue for me finding news. Also finding people just leave in Korea and you just don't get it. It happens in all the leagues, but it's just difficult for me to find Korean. And the Japanese players are typically a little bit cheaper. And then MLS, we are both very familiar with the MLS. If you want to look at the Mexican League or you want to look at the Brazilian League, you can. However, there's very few teams in those leagues that are, 1, covered. Not all teams are covered. And 2, there's a clear best team in Brazil, and that's Mineiro. Well, if you get MLS guys, you get about a month and a half where they're not playing. So it gives you ability to get rewards in when Mineiro guys aren't playing and just smacking out the players as well. So the idea with what you're trying to generate in rewards is you're trying to generate thresholds and you're trying to generate some cards, whether it be tier 2, tier 3, tier 1s. You're going to get cards via the strategy if you do things right. The biggest mistake people make are, one, separating leagues, and then two, getting people that don't play. The number one most important statistic is, does your guy play every game? If he plays every single game, you're never dead.
Yeah.
So people will buy guys that have these big spike weeks, but then sit and don't play and then sub in. And they're just not guys you necessarily want. And obviously, that's going to come with the territory of a smaller gallery and smaller budget. But Laird, don't you see people that play every game and put up like 50s in general?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's funny because it runs counter to the way that I think a lot of people look at budgets and whatnot, where they're like, I have a smaller budget, so I should take like bigger risks in terms of guys who play, because like when they hit, it really pays off. The problem is that when they hit, you have to also hope that all of your other guys hit. And for most game weeks, like you're dead. It's like if you're looking at a score chart and you're like, man, this guy, scores really well when he plays, but he only plays every fifth game. Well, then you know that 4 of your 5 game weeks you're dead, and you have a better shot in that 5th game week, but it's just not good enough necessarily. So like we will definitely focus on players who play all the time, just because, like you said, like if they're playing all the time, then you have a chance, and if guys are not playing, you're basically out of it. It's almost impossible to win rewards with 4 players in your lineup, other than some these random midweeks that don't have any matches. But focus on guys who play. That's
exactly. And speaking, like, if you get 5 guys with like a 50 average, and the goalie gets clean sheet, and another guy scores and gets 80 on a week, you're going to get a card. And you're not asking for that much in that situation. Yep. So I think that's the key. Chris, Challenger Europe, the reason we're not talking about Challenger is because they're going on break. Yes, we would be talking about them more so if it was a different time of the year, but you don't really want to be throwing funds into Challenger right now and then sit here for the next 3.5 months not being able to play. So that's why we're focusing on Asian America. In general, I think Asian America are better than Challenger anyways, because you will generally find players that are a bit cheaper in those regions regardless. But all right, so we're going to hop into it now. I think we've gone over some like basics of like what we're thinking about. So first thing I think we want to start with, and we did a brief look through. I think we spent like 20 minutes looking through, and pricing in Asia is going to be a little bit tighter and more difficult than that in America. So I think we want to start with America to see what we want to do. And generally speaking, we're going to start at goalie, because that's where the most funds are going to be. And then also, if we choose a goalie, it gives us the ability to maybe stack with him depending on what we're seeing at defense. So we're going to use SorareData to do this. I'm going to go through things, and I'm going to, we're sharing my screen, so I'll go faster maybe than usual. So you'll just have to try to keep up with what we're doing. So we're going to go to America. I'm lowering the minimum games from 7 of the last 15 to 3, just because if someone didn't play at the end of last year, maybe they missed a game, maybe they were injured, and they wouldn't show up. So I just want to give the most amount of people possible to show up. And then what we're going to do is we are going to filter with that. We are going to show the price, and then we are going to sort from an L40 perspective. The reason we're going to do that is we always want to look at things from an L40 perspective, because that shows the long-term consistency. For example, Earl Edwards has been okay, really good even for New England.
Yeah.
Well, he's played 3 games and he's not a long-term starter. It doesn't matter as much with goalie, because we just want guys that are starting now and that are going to be goalies. Whereas when we get to other positions, we want guys that are playing like 100% of games and L40s that are still playing. So anyway, speaking through goalies, like another thing you're going to notice, we are not looking in this drill for people like Slonina, people like Everson. You're looking for people that play every game. That's it. That obviously score, the better they can score is great, but realistically speaking, you're looking for guys that are going to play every game, and you're not going to have to be worried about that. So you're going to generally scroll down a bit, and what we're looking for in the range is you generally are going to try to find out what price points goalies are at in like America. So like, for example, we're going to see and we're talking normal goalies. We're talking goalies that are not U23 and not like super duper smash goalies. So like we're going to see Sean Johnson here at 0.991 Joe Willis at 0.65. So, and we see Hamid at like 0.65 as well. So we're knowing that the price range in America is probably going to be around like 0.6 to 0.7 for a lot of goalies, and we want to go under that. So you see Steve Clark here is going to be at 0.58, so that's a little bit under it. So do you want to talk about Tyler Miller? Because I know that's someone you were looking at as an option here.
Hardly looking at. I happen to own Tyler Miller, so I'll say that right off the bat. But yeah, I think we talked about it literally last week about how dumb Goalkeeper is. And one of the things that I always liked that Quinny has said on so many of his videos is that just like buying goalie is like your entry into these contests. And so what we want to do, you obviously don't necessarily want to pick up like the goalie from the worst team in the league, but if they happen to play every game and maybe they have a good all-around score, like it's not a terrible idea. Miller is not one of the worst teams in the league, although Minnesota is not fantastic. But like if you can just get like a middle of the road player like Miller, who is less than half of Sean Johnson, who's like one of the upper tier goalies, like I think being able to fill in Goalkeeper, at least on a more affordable scale like that. Clark is another one, although Houston's pretty bad, but I think being able to have somebody who always plays is just key. And if it's a 5 to 8 point difference between a guy who is literally double the price, then that seems like a pretty good value.
Exactly. And looking like you look at Tyler Miller versus Sean Johnson, there's a 2 point difference in L40.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to pay double the price for a 2 point difference in L40. So
right.
I think some of the goalies we're looking at here, and then we'll pick a couple once we go through, is Tyler Miller's an option. Now, generally speaking, when we go for people like this, you want the younger the better, typically. Now, that said, there are generally older players that will provide value, which maybe we will be buying some older players for that reason. But typically, the younger the better. You want people that really don't have a question as to whether they're starting or not. So, like, for example, Tyler Miller is the unquestioned starter right now. However, Dane Sinclair is there to back him up. So you have to decide, do I want to deal with Dane Sinclair possibly backing him up and starting? Because if that happens, it's incredibly detrimental. So anyways, I think you have Tyler Miller as an option. You scroll a bit lower here, and like, for example, you can see Gillespie is 0.8-ish as an average, and that's just not someone we're interested in for that reason. I think
right, like we'd be interested in him, but
sure.
At 0.8, it doesn't fly.
The base with the midweek, there's I'm not going to worry about midweeks. I'm not going to worry about getting guys that play for Manchester City and playing the midweek. There are some midweeks that will happen in the MLS naturally, but like generally speaking, people that are playing midweeks consistently are people on good teams, which therefore means their prices are going to price you out of getting them. Like I would love to have Carlos Gil in this team, but if we have Carlos Gil in this team, this is going to be a very short video, and it's not going to be a super productive video as well because you're just going to have like two players. I think that Tim Malia is a good option. Now he does have John Pulskamp behind him, so he is a guy that is going to have a little bit of question marks behind him. I think Eloy Room is a great option. I think JT Marcinkowski is a good option. I think that those are probably the guys that we're going to be targeting here because I think that these are some of the best options. I think Maxime Crepeau is a good option as well, a little bit more than the other ones. So do you see anyone else that you want to bring in for us to talk about as an option here?
The only two that I thought, one was Brad Guzan, who kind of has the same thing as Melia, less that he has somebody behind him and more that he's just old. Correct. And so you're probably not getting multiple years of utility out of him. I don't think we're necessarily thinking about multiple years of utility, but
we are. We want as much utility as possible.
Yep. And the other one is, and I will say that I own this guy, so take that with however much salt you want, but Aljaz Ivicic from Portland seems to be the starter now. His floor right now is 0.44. And Portland's not bad, so I think he's fine as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't even show up in this. So like that, I mean, that's a good point because like he didn't show up because I don't think he started except for 2 of the last 40, right?
Yeah.
And he's not even showing up anyways. Let's look him up. I think Ivicic is a great example. It seems like he's pretty clearly the starter there now, and he's got a really good price point at a pretty decent age. So I think what we're going to look for here is we want 2 of the goalies from America. So I think that for me, we want one of the cheaper options, which would be Ivasic, Guzan, and Malia. And I would probably lean towards Guzan or Ivasic. Would you agree?
Yep.
All right. So I'm cool with whatever one you want to pick. Which one are you going with?
Let's go with just the younger guy.
Okay. So we're going to go with Ivasic.
Right.
All right. So we're going to say, let's look at what Ivasic price points is. So his floor is 0.44. He sold for about 0.41. I think 0.41 is probably a reasonable amount. So we're going to call Ivasic 0.41 for this buy. All right. And then I think we probably want, for me, one of Eloy Room or one of Marcinkowski. I know we both think that
We both have room.
We both have room. I have Marcinkowski. I think that Marcinkowski is nice because he's younger and he does have spike games because of how San Jose plays. So
yeah, that's fair.
Probably leaning Marcinkowski due to his age instead of Room. What do you think on that?
I think that makes plenty of sense. I think Room also only has 1 year left on his contract anyway.
Correct.
But yeah, Marcinkowski is yeah, I think that the difference is what you said. Like, I think Room is more consistent, but Marcinkowski is going to have like these spike games that Room tends not to.
Correct. Like, you look through Marcinkowski's log, like he had 58 and gave up 3 goals. Like, you don't get that with other people. And you see a lot of games where he has great all around. Like, you see 21, 43, 27, 30. Like, these are some really strong all around games. So, like, hypothetically speaking, he can help you spike, and he's going to be a goalie that starts. I also like his age. And I think that the way MLS works, so the MLS works differently from an international perspective than other leagues. Guys that leave for international duty on MLS miss games in the MLS. So we generally want guys that aren't on international duty for that perspective. So I think I'd prefer Marcinkowski. I think the age is better with Marcinkowski as well. So, all right. So we see that his floor is 0.5. We saw last buy of 0.48. So we're going to just call 0.48 the price point for Marcinkowski. So now we have 2 goalies in around 0.9 in America. That's good for what we want from America. From a goaltender standpoint. So another thing to note when it comes to strategy is you are not going to have the best forwards when you have a smaller budget because you just can't afford them. Like, I cannot afford Kylian Mbappe on a 5 ETH budget to make a team or teams like that from that perspective. So you're looking at guys that are generally going to play. You want guys that start but not be crushers, because if they're crushers, they're probably a 1 ETH card and you can't afford it. So realistically speaking, every single game week, you're going to play 2 defenders or 2 midfielders. The reason for that is because their floors are going to be a lot more stable than that of the forwards, and they're generally going to be better cards. For example, I can get a like 50 to 55 average defender for 0.1 ETH, whereas like that person's going to cost me like a full ETH as a forward. So that's what we're looking at. So like realistically, what we're looking at here on a defender standpoint is I would say we're looking at people like 0.25 and below, and we probably want to get 3 to 4 of them in America as well. And Laird talked about this too. We're looking for 1 year, especially because it's the beginning of the season. Obviously, the younger person is the better. And also, if they are signed to a more longer term contract, that is better as well. But I'm looking for this year, not necessarily 2 or 3 years down the road. So anyways, like I said, like we're not looking for people like Izquierdo, Zimmerman. We're going to be scrolling down the list here a little bit. I think Angulo is an option, although he's not been as good this year with his transfer.
Yeah.
But I do think he is an option at least. I think Francisco Calvo is a good option with the Marcinkowski pickup because he's someone that is going to be on San Jose, going to be integral to their team, is good in the air, can score goals, is pretty active. I think he could actually be pretty decent for them this year. So he's someone that I think we'll talk about as well. I think Jack Elliott's someone that I like. So here's a note on Andy Nahar. Did you know he doesn't play on turf, Laird?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Andy Nahar doesn't play on turf. So like I would not. Nahar is a really solid option, but he doesn't play on turf. So any game where they
Hmm.
play away that's on turf, he will not play. So that's just something to sort of note, I guess, on that.
There's a decent amount of turf in Major League Soccer.
There is. So like you're talking like maybe he'll miss like a third of the season from those
Hmm.
races. I think Nicholas Ismat Mirian is an option. I think Lawless Abubakar is a good option. Um, I think that there are probably Arriaga is probably a really good option. He seems pretty locked in this year, and he scores pretty well for that team as well. So those are some defenders that I see as good, viable plays. Maybe a Jacob Glesnes. Do you see anyone that stands out to you that maybe I didn't mention here?
No, I think that's pretty much the guys that I'd be looking for. Like, so you mentioned obviously pairing Calvo and Marcinkowski. So we mentioned earlier, like we weren't necessarily looking to stack, but the goalkeeper defender one seems to make the most sense because if they obviously get a clean sheet, then you're getting, the points from both of them. Do you put any premium on that? Not in terms of paying more for it, but like if two guys are basically the same price, you just go with the guy that you have the goalie for?
Yeah, I think that you generally want to stack if you can. If we have the ability to stack and it makes sense, we will stack. Is generally the rule of thumb I have. Yeah, Bullstar, you said that, but he did in those games, despite giving up like 3 goals per game, he still had like a 10 all around, which put him at like 45 points regardless. So if he doesn't score the goals, like you're still getting 45 at him, that's not the end of the world. And whenever San Jose has a shutout, it is very likely that Marcinkowski and Calvo have really strong games, which will help you hit upside, which is why I think he's someone that makes a bit of sense. Another cheaper option that I think is a really good play is Daniel Lovitz, who takes all the sets for Nashville and is going to spike when he gets a goal or an assist. So he's someone that I think is a really strong option as well. I'm just looking further down the list for anyone else that makes sense because we're going to want to buy quite a few defenders that are relatively cheap. I think Nuhu Tolo makes a lot of sense, Laird. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm a big Tolo guy, although his move to left back, I mean, it's not like much of a move. He was a left back for a while. They played a lot of a back three last year where he was he was the left sided center back, but he's like a full fledged fullback now, which doesn't make me like him quite as much. But you skipped like the best guy on the list,
Who did I skip?
Marcelo Silva.
Yeah, I think Marcelo Silva is a good option. I don't know if he's the best guy on the list.
No, he's first, so he's got to be the best, right?
Well, he's first in L5. He's not first in L4.
15, no L15.
Is he first in L15 too? Is that
Yeah.
how it's set up? It's set up L15, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no issue with Silva. Silva's someone that can be really productive as well and is a really solid guy. Like his last 5 games or 6 games, he's averaged like 25 all around score.
You obviously, it's tougher to pair him since David Ochoa is U23 and very expensive, although we don't necessarily have to combine our goalkeeper and
correct.
defender.
So I think from a perspective of how we're going to go about this, I think we definitely want a Francisco Calvo. Do you agree?
Yeah.
All right, so we're looking at Calvo. I think he's a good option. He actually has probably gone up a lot recently. And so like we talk about how bad he is or like how it all is. This is a guy that has an L40 of 56, despite being on 2 just absolutely horrendous. So like he's a guy that can produce regardless. So we're gonna.
He's an international player too.
He is an international player, which I think there's. Again, we talk about like you don't always want your international players, but having a couple is not bad. I think you don't really want them in goalie, but you do want them more so in other positions because like if Calvo goes to international duty, you can still use you'll have other defender options. So
the benefit is he plays international.
Yeah,
like, it's not like there's plenty of guys who are on their international teams and don't play, so you just lose utility those games.
Correct, exactly. All right, so we're gonna call Calvo 0.16 or 116. We're gonna call Calvo 0.116. I think that Lovitz is a necessity at his price point because he's someone that if you look back through his logs, he has a lot of spikes and he always plays. And if he's playing for Nashville, that's going to be a guy that is strong. So we're going to look at Lovitz here, and like we'll see. You see, if you click on all, like you see these games, like these are a lot of really really strong games from Lovitz where he has a lot of chance to just nick decisives and get really strong scores for super cheap, and he doesn't miss games except for when he's injured realistically. So we're going to call
He splits sets though. He doesn't have all of them.
Correct. He split sets. I'm sorry, but he does take some. We're
Yeah.
gonna call him. We're gonna call him his floor price because the recent sale was above on a new car. So we're gonna call him 0.055.
Cheap.
It's really cheap, and I think like guys like that, you cannot underrate how important guys like that are to your team. All right, Laird, who do you want to add in here? I think you want to add in at least 2 more.
Right. We want 2 more. What's funny is that so I wonder how much we're going to like. Obviously, we don't know where we're going to end up, but I feel like we're going cheaper than we have to, and I'm excited to see at the end whether we decide to throw some of these guys out and get better ones or just increase our depth. But like one we didn't mention was Danny Wilson, who's at like 0.13-ish, who I think is like pretty. I mean, he's a pretty consistent defender for Colorado. Colorado is not like the best attacking team, but they're pretty good defensively. Although they just lost Keita to an ACL, and then I don't know how long Trusty is going to be there. But I think, like, do you think we're buying high on Marcelo Silva? It's just like so consistent.
It's possible, but I mean, I think it's fine. Like, so for example, you just talked about Wilson. I actually like Abubakar better than Wilson.
Okay.
But
like
I mean, not to say Wilson's bad. I think I prefer Abubakar over Wilson.
That's fine. I would add Abubakar or Silva to the list.
Okay, so let's add whichever one you want. You pick one.
Let's go with Abubakar because I like his hair.
All right, so we're going to add Abubakar, and then I think that we should add one more person to the list. I kind of like Arriaga. I also like Tola. To be fair, we could add both because I think that there is a situation where we do want both of them. But I think for now, we could add both. What do you?
All right. What's the prices that we want for Abubakar? Because he's at like.
Let's see. All right, so Abubakar.
3.5-ish.
All right, so let's see. Abubakar is going to be. I looked on the wrong one. Oh my gosh, I'm struggling here.
That's weird. I don't see him there. Oh, there he is. Yeah,
there he is. I just misspelled his name. So let's call him 0.115. I don't think he's at 0.135.
I do like 0.12. I don't think
so. Philly, the idea with what we're trying to do is we're going to look at what our preparation, our anticipation is by the end of this is we're going to have an America, Asia, global D4 lineup, and possibly a global D3 is what we're hoping for. There will definitely not be U23 or Champ. They will be too expensive. Champ, like I said at the beginning of the show, if our gallery was 50 ETH, we probably wouldn't buy a single Champ Europe player. Champ Europe is the worst investment on the platform, unless you're just trying to invest in the card and hoping the card goes up.
He was saying Champ America.
No, I'm talking Champ Europe.
No, I know. I'm saying that.
Oh, he's talking Champ America. Yes. So I don't think we're going to go U23. I don't think we're going to have the funds to do that. There is obviously a bonus if we can get someone that is U23. Like we talked about Angulo here. Like if we can get guys that are U23, we would get them. We're anticipating Asia, America, D4, global D4, and then hopefully global D3 if we can make it happen. All right.
Yeah, I think Goalkeeper is just what keeps us out of the U23 pool.
Correct, exact. Goalie's going to cost us like an ETH at least to get in there. And then not even goalie. I mean, it probably would cost us 2 to 2.5 ETH realistically to play just U23 D4. And I just don't think that's within our budget. If we were looking at like a 10 ETH gallery, I think we'd be playing U23 D4.
Yep, I agree there.
Yeah. All right. So Tolo, we're going to call Tolo 0.1 just for ease sakes. And this is someone like Laird talked about. This is the guy who absolutely smashed. Like if you get this range right here, this is the guy that is just very, very good. And at 0.1, it's worth the risk for his age to get him in. And then Arriaga, again, like this is another nice thing is if they have a really favorable matchup, Seattle, you could play Tolo and you could play Arriaga.
Yep.
You also are getting the midweek utility that was mentioned earlier just by having these guys as of now. So there is valuability there. So we're going to call him 0.15.
Yep.
All right. And then, like I said, at the end, we might have to cut some funds. We might have to cut some players. But that was probably a bit cheaper even than what we were planning to spend there. And we bought probably an extra card. So we will see.
It's also just America, though.
It is. It is also just America. All right. So we are at midfielders where we're going to go next. So I definitely think that there's going to be some good midfielders we had in this region. Would love to add a Carlos Gil here. It just isn't realistically going to be a super viable play here. Most of these top end guys are not going to be viable. I think someone who's a bit older that makes a little bit of sense, but isn't within America is Vecchio. And now, Laird, here's a question for you. Like, I kind of think we want to have a more marquee midfielder to go along with some cheaper options. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the reason why is that there are so few marquee defenders and forwards, and, or the forwards are just so expensive. Like I think you can, because of the position scarcity, that you can get like an impact player in midfield that is significantly cheaper than like similar scores from a forward. So there's that. I think that. So I agree. Yes, I think this is where you kind of spend up if you're going to.
Yeah, and I'm not saying even spend up, just like maybe more marquee guys. So like someone I think we might consider here is Alex Ring. He's just so consistent and does have some spike games as well. So he's someone that I think we'll be considering here. Now, a question for you is, do you like the idea of getting like a Jamiro Montero despite being on San Jose and looking pretty terrible recently?
How much is he?
0.17.
Oh, that's pretty cheap. If I knew that he was going to have set pieces at some point, then it would be different. But I'm just
Correct.
not sure it's there. I think so. A few people in chat have brought this up that we're like kind of ignoring like Peru and Argentina and Brazil, and it's not that we don't think that there are not good players in there. There are some values certainly, but if we like, I think you could do this entire exercise, and for how much we're spending on MLS, you focus on Argentina, and you can
Correct.
probably get by. I think the better players in Argentina end up being a little more expensive. Like there's a premium for them because people know that they're good. But I think just as we said at the beginning, if league stacking ends up being pretty important, and so even if we bought a few, added a few Peru or Argentina league guys here, at some point we could have a situation where they're not playing, and now we're kind of we've spent up for guys that are not in our lineups.
Correct, and that's the thing. I do think, Mike, that Illy Sanchez is going to have a pretty good year here. I'm probably not going to recommend him here, but I do actually agree with that. I think that that's a pretty good call. There's one other person that I wanted to mark down, and then we will go through some of the players. So, guys that I just opened up tabs on here is I opened up Alex Ring, Mauricio Pereira, Diego Chara, Pedro Santos, Keaton Parks, and Jackson Ewell. Those are some guys that I think have pretty good value based on mids. Is there any other names that you see that you think we should be talking about or looking up?
There's one who I bought early on the platform and sold, and my opinion of him changes like by the day, but I think Luciano Acosta should be in the conversation.
I would agree with that. I actually have a super. I think that's a good point. To Pozuelo and Lodero, I do like Pozuelo. I think that he is relatively cheap right now. I don't want any part of Lodero. I'm good on that. I think Delgado is a good option actually. I'll bring up Delgado too. He's someone that's pretty solid as well. So like that's a card I just don't want anything. Like there's two cards I don't want anything to do with in America, and that is Lodero and Vela. And Vela's great, but man, I just don't trust him or know what to do with Vela. So that's my thoughts on Vela. Laird, do you have anything different?
As somebody who has Vela, I'm extremely concerned about Carlos Vela. Starting today, there's no way I buy Carlos Vela. It's as simple as that. To be honest, I thought you were going to say Nicolas De La Cruz because I just happened to like scroll by him.
No.
But
Yeah, so Bullstar, Reynoso is probably someone we should talk about. I'm a bit concerned with his issues that he's had, and then also his price point is probably going to be a little bit too high for us to justify here, I think. But he's definitely someone that for sure would be someone I consider. So I think a card we definitely buy out of this group is Diego Chara. I know I talked to you before we came on. This is just a guy, he literally just runs 90s, just churns really strong scores. He doesn't get super high-end scores that frequently, whether it be with a decisive or like a goal line clearance or something. But like this is a guy that just really churns, and he just does not really miss many games. So I think at his price point, he's a definitive. So we'll call him 0.09. All
I
right.
actually think we might come back to Chara because I actually think he's a better super rare than a rare.
I don't disagree with that. And I think that is 100% a thought process we will have at the end of this for sure. Because I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, like I think we're going to get to a point where like we could change these two guys into two that are less, and that gets us to a Chara super rare. But then we do the whole how do we get a second super rare? But like those scores right there just scream super rare to me.
100% agree with that assessment. I think that's definitely. I mean, do you want to just call it now and just say we're going to buy his super rare now?
Let's include both. Just
okay. That because I don't think having his rare would be bad either. Man, I don't even. We're going to call his super rare 0.2.
0.2, yeah.
Which is like a joke. So like I agree that there is no way we don't walk away with getting his super rare.
I might just buy that one right now.
yeah. Well, there's a lot on the market. So all right, Nifty just talked about Godoy. So we're gonna look up Godoy. I do agree with Annabelle Godoy a bit. He's pretty strong as well, and he's someone that you can pair with Lovitz as well. So like he would be an option. So all right, who do you have as the next mid you want to add?
It was on your list. I really like Mauricio Pereira, who actually whose rare card I sold, and I think he banged like 100 the next day. But I like him, and I think Pedro Santos makes a lot of sense. Again, that's another card I've bought recently, so that's probably why I think it makes sense. But
Weird, Laird.
What's that?
Weird, Laird. After you bashed me for the Pedro Santos list.
I bashed you a long time, and then I paid like twice what I should have paid for.
Yep, exactly. All right, so we're gonna call Pereira 0.2. We're just gonna keep it easy. Call him 0.2. And I think a lot of that too with Pereira is he's gonna have a lot more additional. He's gonna be the guy this year. I think he's gonna be the guy. And then who was the other one that you said?
Santos.
Oh, Pedro Santos. Yeah, I agree with Pedro Santos as well. He's going to be playing left back. He has taken the penalty kick in the last preseason game when everyone else was on the field. So I think he's a good option as well. And we're going to call him 0.124. And then I think, and you'll agree with this one, we're going to add Keaton Parks for right now as well. Because he's coming back from injury. He's someone that's very consistent. He's also someone that's a bit younger that we both like a lot and think he can put up scores. Like, obviously, you see what he did recently. It's not great, but like in previous years, he's been a guy that's just churned out all around. I actually think he will be someone that scores more goals as well due to his height. He'll be more of a central piece in set pieces. So we're gonna put a Parks in there right now as well, and we're gonna call him 0.16.
I'm not sure you're getting him for 1.6 though.
Maybe. I mean, he's literally
got. Oh, it's 0.166. That's the floor.
Yeah, I said 0.16. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you definitely get it for that.
That's absurd.
It is. I agree, 100%. That's why I think we definitely add him in. All right. So then
we should note also he loses his U23 this year.
He does.
We're not buying him for that reason. He's young, so that's helpful. But
correct. It is helpful. He's on a contract, and we don't know if he's going to leave or not. He's someone that could maybe stick around the MLS a bit longer. So I think he's definitely someone we look at as well. All right, we're going to move into forward. So forward is going to be difficult. Forward is going to be a position we spend quite a bit of our funds on, I believe, because we just don't really have another option. So what we're looking for with forward is obviously play every game. We want someone to play every game. I know a name we're going to say, you're going to be like, this guy's not great. It's true. No one's great, because if you want any of these guys that are good, you're going to be paying like 0.7 ETH minimum for any of these guys. And I just don't think that it's going to be worthwhile for that. You just want a guy that's going to be able to play that can maybe just nick a score point. So some guys that I think are people that make sense here are going to be Yimi Chara, Christian Dahome. I know you like Christian Dahome a lot, which we'll talk about. I think that we're going to look at Kasper Shabilko, one of your favorites. And I think we're going to talk about Romel Kyoto as well. And I think Kasper Shabilko. So I think we're going to be looking at like those 3 or 4 forwards based on what I'm seeing from price point. Do you see anyone else that you think we should be talking about?
The only other ones are outside of MLS. Like I had mentioned Julio Furch to you. I think Julian Quinones, like kind of fits if you want to go outside of that. But if we're sticking to MLS, which based off of what we were saying, league stacking, like I think that's what we should do. But it only just kind of accentuates how bad forward is this
Correct.
summer. Overall.
Yimmy Chara is midfielder rare, and I don't know if he has any forward rares, to be honest, which is
I realize that. That's
the issue with him. He scores pretty well as a forward, though, to be honest. So like we can just remove Yimmy Chara as an option because he's probably not someone that we realistically will look at. So I think we definitely had talked about we're going to add a Kyoto. His price is just way too cheap. Now you have to be careful. You have to buy his forward card.
yeah.
So we're going to go above this, and I'm going to use the 0.22 for Kyoto as the buy price because the forward card is a lot better card than the midfielder. But like this, the guy, if you look back to a year ago, was a smasher.
There's no way you buy the midfielder card.
I have the midfielder card actually. But no, you definitely do not want the midfielder card. You want the forward card. Yes, some of the Kyotos are forward cards. And then I think you definitely have to get Shibilko. Do you agree?
Yeah.
And it's not because like he's great, but like this guy's just gonna run 90s for Chicago, and
that's minutes, not points.
Yeah, he's gonna just like I think you're playing these guys hoping they get a decisive on a certain game week. So Shibilko, we're gonna call 0.27.
Jeez, I'm gonna just predict that that's one of the first ones we throw out.
Could be. And then so from another forward perspective, like do you want to add a Dahome or do you want to add someone else or anything else that you saw that you think made sense?
Dahome just seems a little too expensive.
He does. And like we could talk a Julio. I think we want another one as an option. So like if you think Furch is a good option, I think that going outside of the area in one spot is okay. You just can't fully go out of the league.
Yeah, I think Furch is basically the Mexican League Kasper Shibilko.
Okay, so let's call Furch and let's call him 0.22.
So we're currently at 2.915 ETH.
Yep. So, all right. So that is going to be our American base. And within that American base, we actually have a super rare Laird. So
that's true.
We're ahead of the game with what we were planning to do from that perspective. All right. So now we're going to go into Asia.
Before we go into Asia, the one thing that, not that we're ignoring, but the move to Rare Pro obviously requires another goalkeeper.
Correct.
And so that's like, people think that like going from rares to super rares is like the jump, but it's actually having to buy another goalkeeper. And
Correct.
Frankly, some people buy a super rare goalkeeper, which I think is actually a pretty reasonable strategy for Rare Pro, but it's a jump.
Correct. And what we're going to do here is like, I think we're going to try to get 3 to 4 goalies. It's probably going to end up 3. You can probably play a common goalie in one of the D4s, probably not the global D4, but you can play it in Asia or America. Wherever your weakest lineup is, you probably would just play a common goalkeeper there in certain weeks. So looking through the Asian options, so I know Kim Dong-hun is probably a really good option that I don't want to realistically get because they just did some wonky goalie stuff last year for Incheon, but he's someone that we probably are going to have to consider. I don't think I would want Kwon Sun Tae because I think Yuya Oki will start at some point.
Everybody is hoping that Oki starts.
I sure hope that way.
Yeah.
So I think those are someone that we're gonna have to consider. I think Park Il-gu is a option that we're gonna be considering here. I think he's got a decent price point. I think Kim Jin Hyun is a good price point as well. And those are realistically the only goalies that I think are options. However, you have another goalie that I think you want to bring up that you talked about beforehand.
Well, before that, I want to add Takatu Hayashi to the list of guys that we don't really want because everybody's kind of expecting Osako to take that job. So,
like, yeah, and Hayashi is old, like really old.
So yeah, like he's like super old, like he's like a few months younger than me. So,
correct. So those are the guys we're looking at. I think for me, we definitely are buying. Do you want to talk about Higuchi?
Yeah, so Misaki Higashiguchi, excuse me, is the Gamba goalkeeper who has been out to start the season, but I don't know if it was COVID or it's like
That's
an
a knee
illness, isn't
injury.
it?
It's a knee injury, I
It
think.
was a knee. All right.
Slight knee injury is what I heard.
He's like a club legend though, and is fully expected to like start when he's fit. And the expectation is he's supposed to be fit soon.
Yeah.
So he's pretty cheap. He's still under like 0.35. And I think that's worth like Gamba's a good team. They've had a horrible start to this. Like their schedule has just been brutal. And so I think they turn it around and to get their goalie, hopefully he turns in. Like I hate saying like, once he comes back because I just, injury news is not always the clearest, but he seems like somebody worth that risk, knowing we're buying multiple goalkeepers anyway.
Correct. And looking at this, like there's no way he doesn't start. If he wasn't going to
Right.
be the starting goalie, they would have brought back Tawny from loan. They wouldn't have let him stay out on loan and shown on Belmar. So I think for me, the clear goalie for sure is going to be Kim Jin Hyun. I think that they're going to be a bit better this year because I just think they're a bit better, honestly. I think that their team's going to be a bit better in general.
Okay.
And I think he's definitely one of the options that we're going to look at. So he's got a floor of 0.24, recent sales 0.4. We're going to call it 0.4.
You know this league much better than I do, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to.
And then I think the other one that we're going to look at is I don't want to take the risk on Higuchi being out for like 2 months. So I think the other one we're going to get is Park Il-gu.
Okay. I like him particularly because it capitalizes all of Park.
Yeah, exactly. And he's not as good because honestly, Eduardo's gone and it's made them worse, I think. But he has really good all around as you see here. Like he's got some really strong games and they're generally pretty strong defensively.
Yep.
So we're gonna call him 0.5.
0.5.
We're just gonna call him 0.5. All right, so that is our goalies in Asia. Now we're going to move to the defenders in Asia. We're going to try to keep stuff relatively cheap as well, because at the end, we definitely are going to have to cut some stuff. Probably going to end up having to cut a goalie as well.
How do you find price like goalie or excuse me defender pricing in Asia? Like, do you find that they're actual values or?
I do think there's quite a few values. I think that there's a lot of like the really strong people are relatively cheap as well. Like Sho Suzuki's 0.252, and look at what he does.
Yeah.
So like I think that he's someone that we're going to look at. So we're going to look at Sho Suzuki. He's probably going to be a bit too expensive for what we're trying to do, but he just smashes. Like Koike. Koike has got like 40 to 57. He's 0.289. So that's something. I think someone we're definitely going to buy is Masato Morishige. He's a little bit older, but he absolutely is a really good option as a defender here as well. And then let's see. I would like to have Fukumori, but he's probably a bit too expensive. I think Shunta Tanaka is going to be an option that we look at. I think Hayata Araki is a good option. I think Jen Shoji is a good option as well. Is there any other guys that you think that I have not mentioned? Because I know you're not as familiar with Japan, but is there anyone that you like that I haven't talked about?
No, I just feel like the cheaper you go, they actually seem to look better. Like Morishigi's score wise is really good.
Yeah.
So like that almost seems like a slam dunk to me.
Yeah, I think so. For me, we're gonna add Morishige, for sure. I actually have his super rare, which I won, which I get terrible offers for all the time. I feel like people like that are just the guys you get the worst offers for. Like, I'm not going to sell a super rare that scores like 57 average for like 0.3 ETH people. I'm just not going to do that, even if they're older. But like, yeah, you see him. Like, this is a guy that just smacked all last year. Yes, he's old. Like, am I going to get 3-4 years out of him? Probably not. But I know I can probably get this year out of him. So the beginning of the season, he missed due to COVID. So, like, he's back, as you see, and he played also in the cup game. There was a cup game in between this, and he played in that as well. So, he is back. I actually played him in my D3 lineup, or sorry, my Global Rare Pro lineup.
There it is.
So, anyways, we're going to call him 0.12.
Yeah.
And then I think we definitely add a Hayota Araki as well. I think he's a guy that has really good, stable scoring that also does have some upside. Like you'll see, he has 100, he has a 98. He has another 100 back here. Like you see some really high upside for this guy.
Yeah, that's...
And this is definitely someone we're going to add, and we're going to call him 0.16.
Yep.
And is there anyone else you want to add here, Laird, or no?
Black's getting all excited for the Tokyo stack here.
Of course. Well, just wait till the Chicago Fire stack comes out here, Black.
I think we're kind of in this price range is the problem. Like Koga is really expensive, and so is Fukumori. Those are guys like we would like to have, sure, but
I think we add in Gen Soji here, and then we can we're probably going to eliminate some people as we go here, and we'll see what we're going to eliminate at the end.
Yeah.
Because I think we're going to end up around 5.5, 6 ETH, and we probably are going to want to add another super rare. So we're probably
going to. How much is he going for? What are we putting him in?
We're going to put Soji at 0.11.
Yeah. All right. We're going to show the kind of our roster at the end of this.
Yeah, we can pull that up once we're done with this part of things where it's easier to show through things. All right, so midfielder in Asia, I do think there's actually some really strong midfielder options that are relatively cheap as well that I've seen. So I think we're going to look at Osmar. I know you and I have talked about him before. I love Osmar, even though he's in Korea. So that is going to be a little bit of cross league, but I think he's really strong. Hotaru Yamaguchi is going to be someone who I'm pretty confident we will be picking him. Sergi Samper, this is a guy that played at Real Madrid, was in the Real Madrid youth system. So he's a really strong option as well. I didn't realize
Yamaguchi got that cheap.
Yeah, I didn't realize he did either until I started looking at this a little bit earlier. And there's going to be a lot of other guys that are going to be cheaper, but I don't really want to go super cheap at midfield because I do think that's where we go. I do like Tsukasa Morishima. I think he's pretty strong, and I think Takura Kaneko is also relatively strong as well for cheaper options. They're both going to be a little bit more score point dependent than some of these other mids. But actually, Morishima is probably better, so we'll probably end up buying Morishima. So
I sold Morishima last year because it was just so frustrating how often he misses.
It was, but he's actually not that bad, I don't think. He got injured at the end of the year with a knee injury.
I'm just saying his L40 is 75% and is in terms of games played, and his L15 is 47.
Yeah, he had a lot of knee injuries, but if you look through the rest of it, he had never used to miss games.
Sure.
So anyways, I think for the purposes of this, we're going to add Osmar because this guy just absolutely smashes and just churns super consistent.
You need to show his defender points.
Yeah, so all right, so this is something. So I love Osmar. He's a great card, right? This is his midfielder card. He plays center back for FC Seoul, and they hold a lot of possession, and he just gets a ton of passing stats. Like everything is passing. So this is as a midfield card that plays center back. So you just see a massive amount of solid 60+ point games. He also takes penalties though. So if you get a decisive, you're going to get 90 points from him. Look at his defender card.
It's everything's just whoop.
His defender card is absolutely massive. And you see, both of these hundreds he put up, there is not a decisive in those hundreds. He had 86 all around as a defender. If Osmar was classified properly as a defender card, he would be one of the best cards on the platform, I think. Is there a way to look at what his L40 average would be if he was a defender?
I don't think we have it actually.
Yeah, because I'm thinking his L40 average as a defender is close to 70 points.
I think he would be the best player on the platform.
65. But regardless, midfield card's great. So we're going to buy an Osmar, and he is 0.225. I think we are for sure going to buy a Yamaguchi.
Yeah.
That's way too cheap for what you get out of Yamaguchi. Again, you see what Yamaguchi does. The guy smashes, doesn't miss games really at all unless he's got an injury. And we're going to call him 0.2. Mm-hmm. I do think you can get him a little cheaper in that, actually, because if there's that many on the floor, 0.2, you definitely get him cheaper, but for ease sake. And then we're going to get a Morishima, because I think at a price point, he's a good option as well at the price point. So Morishima, we're gonna call 0.1. That's fine. We'll call him 0.5. Yeah, I wouldn't touch Iniesta. He's a terrible card to get. Like, he's just pretty useless. You can basically never play him.
I like this. Hold on, from Connor. What do you think the Osmar Defender card unique would sell?
I don't know, Connor, but there's a good chance I would buy it. But I don't know that answer because people really. So I have been offered like 10-ish for like Hatanaka, who's probably a better card than Osmar because he puts up similar scores and is younger. I would reckon Osmar Defender would be 6 to 8 ETH. Maybe less. It could go. It literally could go for like 3 ETH. Like, it could go for something super stupid.
For the best defender on the platform.
Yeah, for like the best defender out there. So, all right. So that is going to do it for the midfielders. Now we're going to move to forward. Forward in Asia is incredibly difficult. There's just not much. Like, we talked about Shibilko and Furch at like 0.2 and Kyoto at 0.22. It does not exist in Asia. There's just not really anyone that is super cheap, and I think we may have to pay up here. Is there anyone that you like at forward in Asia that makes sense?
Yeah, the one that I showed you before, because we were talking about how like the Asia forward list is so weak, but Edgar Silva from Daegu is like a guy who plays.
Well, he actually scores really well.
He does score well, and I think he takes penalties when Cecina is not around, which isn't often. But it's somebody who plays next to Cecina, which I know they're not as good this year as they were last year, but like that's got to give you some sort of confidence, right?
Correct. And I think he's solid. I also think that we are going to pay up at 1 a little bit, and I think we get Matus.
And you think what?
We get Matus.
Oh, okay.
Because he scores incredibly well with a great all-around, and his price point is not unreasonable. So I think we buy both of those guys, actually. So we're going to – and there's not much there. Like, if you look there, there's not much. Like, I would – it's not the best situation to get him. I'll just throw you one of my my Scottish uniques, Connor, to sort of like distract you from it. Yeah, Matus takes sets, takes penalties. He's really good. He'll be your marquee forward. All right, who was I looking up? Edgar Silva. So Edgar Silva, we're going to call 0.16 for Edgar Silva. And then Matus, we are going to call...
It's going to be close to 0.5. Right?
I think he's probably under that. Well, there hasn't been any sales recently. Let me see if there's been any auctions. We're going to call, we'll call 0.5. We'll call 0.46 because there was last auction was 0.46 last week. So we'll call him 0.46. So
that's an ongoing one.
Yeah, it literally someone bid to the 0.46 to try to get it. So I think that there's a situation that you hold them to. So like we're going to go through and we're going to delete some stuff. So I can stop sharing my screen. You can share.
Yeah, I can just pull it up here. So
okay.
What we have here.
So something to note with this is like the teams that we are giving here, these teams can legit win. Like you can run a team that has a goalie, a somewhat strong defender, strong midfielders, and forwards that are good. Like you could realistically run a lineup that is Park Il-gu, and I'm talking about global, from a global perspective. Like you can run like Park Il-gu, you can run Morishige, Osmar, Yamaguchi, Matus. That's a team that like averages high 60s, or not high 60s, but like averages like high 50s as an average. Like that's a legit team that can hit a podium.
Yeah, I'd put this into the concepts thing on SorareData, but like the seasons have just started. Just it's a very wonky graph. That's all. So it's a little difficult to like show exactly where these guys have performed together. But
yes,
you can certainly do that if you want.
So like so like we're talking like these are guys that can legitimately get you on podiums. Is it going to happen? Most likely, no, not all the time. But like every single week, any of these players you put in a lineup 1 is going to get you a threshold, 2 is going to get you cards. You're going to get multiple cards a month doing this. You're going to get almost every threshold doing this. And then you want to prioritize All-Star D4 every week, because that is where you are going to get your threshold, and therefore it trumps America and Asia D4. So the way you're going to look at this is you're going to look at this from a perspective of you're going to prioritize global rare and global rare pro, and then you're going to prioritize America rare and Asia rare, and you're going to get 4 lineups out there realistically, and they're going to be productive. What we're going to hopefully do here is we're going to find a defender. So I think we need to cut about 0.8 ETH off of this. Do you agree?
To get a super rare? Like
Yes.
we only have 1 super rare now. Is
Yes,
that how
we need to find another super rare, and I think it's going to be a defender.
Yep.
And we're going to find a defender that makes sense. So should we do that first? Let's look through the defender list here. I think we want a defender. The reason we want a defender is so that if you have an elite level midfielder, that you can still play them with Diego Chara, or with like Diego Chara super. So like if you have 2 elite level super mids, you can't run any of your other mids in that lineup. It has to be those 2 super mids. So like we're going to look for a defender in either America or Asia that is a strong option from a super perspective. So
I also want to say that, like, I was going to put teams together, but what you don't want to do is look at this gallery and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to play in All-Star Rare every week, and this is what I'm going to like. Every week is different. The matchups change everything. Guys could get hurt, or you could have 5 guys with great matchups or terrible ones. So like, don't like, you can think that way of like, oh, this is what I'll play. Like if everything is set up perfectly for all these guys, but like you have to realize that you have to be very flexible with how these lineups get built, because some weeks, every week is different. So just remember that when you're putting actual lineups together.
100%. Like you want to be playing matchups and stuff like that. Looking for food, I never recommend waiting for cards. What happens if you end up waiting for cards is, 1, they end up being really high for the first runs of auctions anyways, and you miss like half the season. So I don't generally like to do that from that perspective. All right, so from a defender standpoint, and we're open to a defender being in America or Asia. With the Diego Chara super rare, we would prefer it to be in America most likely, so that we have the option of running it in America D3 in a certain situation as well. So we have Calvo at 0.55. That's someone that and it might be lower like when we look at things. So like I think he's someone that could be an option for us here. Danny Wilson that you mentioned is someone that I think could be an option here. Lawless Abubakar is someone that could be an option as well. Your boy Dabasi popping up there, Laird.
Who also just popped up on the injury report, I noticed earlier.
Yeah, looking for food. So that is generally the like price point where they get a bit cheap, but like that's like 1 month after they launch. They launch like 1 or 2 months into the season. All of a sudden, you've missed over half the season because you waited for that. Whereas you would have won more from them if you just had them in your gallery.
Right. Like I think you need to remember that there is there's a time cost of
correct.
You're missing out on things if you're just waiting to buy.
Correct.
How much was Dabasi?
Dabasi was like 0.266, but
okay, because I see there's a Michael Boxall at 0.249. Shout out to Black for that one. He probably is hoping to sell.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a viable person. He's a viable person. And to be fair, maybe we buy 2 super rares, Laird. Maybe we buy 2 and we cut out some other pieces instead to give us a little bit more depth from a super rare perspective, right?
Well, we have the Chara one already.
Correct. Is there anyone else that you see that makes sense to you to pull up? What I pulled up so far is Calvo, Danny Wilson, Lawless Abubakar, Jonathan Mensah, and Michael Boxall.
That sounds about right. Like, okay. Yeah, I just don't know how much we're going. Like, Tolo is 0.49.
We definitely will pull him up and see.
Yeah, like I'm actually looking just at the live offers.
And what I'm gonna do is we're gonna look at the price, and like it might not be that high because super rares generally, like we're probably gonna say it's like 3 to 4 of X the rare price, or if there's recent sales, we'll go that way. So and then let's look at Asia as well. And Asia is generally gonna be better scores, so you're maybe would, and like I said, like when I was saying about getting 2, like maybe we want 3, right? Like maybe we want Chara and 2 other super rares, and then we limit our rares a little bit more to be able to do that.
Yep.
So looking through this, and I'm only
I mean,
trying to pick someone. Go ahead.
Love It Super Rare is 0.38.
Oh, we're gonna open that too. I think there's a good chance we're gonna get one of these. Yeah, so like as you see, 0.38. So Lovitz is someone we're gonna open up as well, and is a good option. So all right, back to Asia. I want to see if there is a defender in Asia that can make sense for us here. All right, so like I think you could hypothetically get a Sho Sasaki for a reasonable price, but I'm not positive on that, so I don't want to put him here.
Yeah, obviously the lack of increased scarcity, lack of supply for super rares makes pricing them a little difficult. Like
Correct.
it's one thing if like there's a recent sale, but if there's nothing on the market now and like nobody wants to sell, like us estimating a price is probably one that like we think is fair.
Correct.
But if nobody's going to sell at that price, then that's not the price.
Correct. 100% agree with that. And that's a realistic thing. Generally speaking, you can knock a bit off of what is listed and then get it for a different price. So I think the ones that I saw here in Asia that make sense to me is Morishige and Hayato Araki. Oh, you'll also notice a theme. Like a lot of the people we bring up are people that we liked their rares as well, because generally we like their rares because they are relatively cheap.
Right. If the rares are underpriced, then the super rares probably are too.
So I think to me, so let's go back to our team and see what our team looks like. And then we will see what we can sort of chop off here. And then we'll decide what super rares to get. So I do think we want 4 goalies. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think we should cut a defender. And I think that defender should be Arriaga.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
or a Rocky. I actually think it should be a Rocky. Maybe not though, because then we have a little bit more of a balance in America.
That's what I was. Yeah, the only reason is that like we were a little MLS heavy.
Yeah, so I think we get rid of Arriaga.
Bummer, dude.
I think we get rid of some midfielders. I think we get rid of Diego Chara.
Yep.
I think we also probably want to get rid of one of the forwards. I think we get rid of either Julio Furch or Shabilko. I probably lean towards getting rid of Furch because of
just staying in MLS.
Yeah, trying to stay in MLS. So like if we do all of that, I also think we could. So we are now under 5 ETH. If we realistically want to get a good super rare, we could get rid of a goalie. Or we need to get rid of a little bit more in terms of the other positions. So do you think it's viable to get rid of a goalie? Or do you think it is more realistic to just stick with getting rid of like one other player and then bring in one of the cheaper options as a super rare?
I'm not sure Matus is worth the percentage of the gallery as he is.
He is, because you're going to have to play someone in D3. So you need to have 4 forwards.
I'm not saying we didn't need a 4th forward. I'm just not sure we need to spend that much on one. But I guess we just went through why they were all so bad.
Well, I do think having a marquee forward that you have as an option is a good thing.
Okay.
I think he's pretty marquee. I think he has a pretty good chance to go up. Let's see the Gen Soji. Someone just recommended Gen Soji. Let's see his super rare. His super rare probably would be like 0.4, I think. I think what we do here is,
of course so.
My thoughts on his super rares are, let's see what Gen Soji super rare. He went for like 0.36. So you're probably looking at like 0.36 from a Gen Soji super rare standpoint. I think what we do is we get rid of maybe
an MLS defender, another one.
That's what I was kind of thinking here.
Calvo or Abubakar?
Maybe. I'm trying to think about if we want to bring in. I think getting a Boxall super. Let's look at the Boxall super, because I think that's going to be the path we're going to look at here with our funds.
Oh man, Andy's gonna be so pissed.
So I think you're looking at Boxall Super Rare, and I think that Super Rare could be even a bit cheaper than that. Yeah, so we're gonna call the Boxall like 0.22.
Yeah.
So let's put Boxall in at 0.22, and that's gonna be our final purchase. And again, like we do have the ability, if we wanted to add like another Super Rare, we could just shed one of the goalies. I think that's the best shed we could do, and we could then have another Super Rare, and you just run a common in one of the D4s. So was yours the 2.219 or 0.227 black?
I think he sold it a while ago.
So I think what we do here is I actually think we dump a Bubakar.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
That's what I was thinking.
So if we dump a Bubakar,
Dang, 4.99.
4.99 gallery. So like let's build some lineups with this gallery now, Laird. Not like build them, but like let's show
Yeah,
what
I'll just put them. Yeah.
Yeah, so like all right, so we're gonna have an Ivasic, we're gonna have a Tolo. I'm sorry, no, remove that. We're gonna have a Boxall Super Rare.
Are you doing that one first?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that one first. We're gonna have a Chara Super Rare. We're gonna have a Matus. And we're gonna have an Osmar. That is a legit lineup that can win cards in Division 3, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good lineup.
Yeah, like that's a legit lineup that you can win cards in Division 3. All right, next line.
Let me 1, 2, Osmar, Chara, Matus. That's 1.5 ETH for that team.
So like 1.5 ETH team that legit can win rewards in D2. If you get one
D3,
card, if you get like 1 star over the whole season, it pays for the entire team. Literally 1. And if you like get like you probably need for that to pay off like 3 to 4 cards over the whole year. And I'm pretty confident you'll get it because Matus and Osmar have really all of those guys have really strong all-arounds. And Matus and Osmar can really spike.
Yep.
So yeah, you're definitely gonna get it. All right, next team, we're gonna have Marcinkowski, Calvo, Correa,
yeah.
Kyoto.
Guys are so bad.
Yep. And we're gonna run Keaton Parks. Again, that lineup can get you cards. If they have a clean sheet, that can get you cards.
Yep.
All right. Next lineup, that lineup was America. We'll call that lineup America Rare Pro. All right, so we're gonna play Kim Jin Hong. We're gonna play Morishige. We're gonna play Yamaguchi. We're gonna play Shabilko. And we're gonna play Pedro Santos. There's your all-star rare lineup.
Yep.
And then we're going to do Asia Rare. So you're going to have Park Il-gu. We're going to have Araki. We're going to have Morishima. We're going to have Edgar Silva. And we're going to have Jen Soji.
Wait, that's not Rare Pro. We actually didn't even use a common goalkeeper.
Yeah, we don't even use a common goalkeeper in this strategy. Those 4 lineups, every single one of them can win a card. The Asia Rare lineup is the weakest of the lineups of them all, but literally all 4 of those lineups can win cards any given week. And the rare or the all-star rare lineup is going to hit you thresholds almost every single week, without question. So King Kazan asked a good question. If we had 5 ETH more, what would we be doing with that? I know what I would be doing. What would your plan be?
I'd probably buy more super rares.
Yeah. So my plan would be add depth and add super rare. So I would probably, a lot of those lists of super rares we added, I would try to add probably, I would say 4 to 5 more super rares. I would add like the Iraqi super rare that we looked at. I would add the Tolo super rare, the Calvo super rare, the Morishige super rare. I would add cards like that. I would try to add 1 or 2 defenders in Asia, 1 or 2 mids in Asia, and then 1 or 2 guys in America in general, and then I would just use the rest on depth, whether it be I would probably add another goalie, and then I would add some additional depth.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem, and I think the question was really like, do you jump into U23? But like at this point so far, I think there are essentially three U23 goalies, and they're not all like one ETH. Some are more, but like you're probably looking at 20% of that 5 more ETH just in a goalie, and then having to buy fill out the rest of the U23, which is why we felt like buying more super rares because you can utilize the cards that you have here. Like you're just improving what you have as opposed to essentially starting fresh. But I don't know. U23 is fun. Like we all like playing it, but it's
yeah. And I'm not saying U23 is bad. I think that U23 is totally a viable path. It just if you're going U23 out, you're going to have no depth anywhere. Having no depth anywhere is bad. It's generally very bad not having depth. And then also you're not utilizing any of these cards there. I think you'll get a lot further being able to run. If you run Gas Rare and Rare Pro, Asia Rare and Rare Pro, America Rare and Rare Pro, and you can run that all summer with like these type of cards. Like I think for a 10 ETH gallery, you could pay it off in the summer.
Yes, it's absolutely possible.
I think it's realistically possible to if you spent 10 ETH today. And actually, I wish we had the ability to do this. Like I totally would buy. I would put 10 ETH in and do this and see. But I'm pretty confident if you put in 10 ETH right before the season starts, like let's say 2 weeks ago, I'm pretty sure by the end of summer you would have paid off the entire gallery.
Mm-hmm.
If you sold like every reward and then didn't really funnel in tons of additional of the rewards into reinforcements. Because the thing is, like we're showing this right, but that list is very thin. If you take a bunch of injuries, you're going to be really in trouble and you need to fill those. But there's going to be guys that you can fill for 0.1 ETH that, or 0.25 even for like a super rares that you can make it work. So there's tons of options that you can do with that. And I think a 10 ETH gallery like that could totally pay off in 6 months.
Yeah, no, I agree. And obviously any reward that you win adds to depth anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have to go out and buy the depth. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean you're winning guys that you want.
Correct.
But you can, if you want to sell them and to buy other players, like the idea is that the rewards help you in those aspects. And obviously, I think the expectation is that we'll see mostly America and Asia rewards this summer in All-Star Rare and Rare Pro, or all the All-Stars. I don't think it's going to be exclusive like it was like sporadically last year, but like you could theoretically win European cards to get you ready for the summer and fall through these lineups. And so it's not like you are coming in with 5 ETH, buying these players and forever playing America and Asia. Like you can win European cards to help you get started to progress out to the other divisions as well.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we expect. So the thing is, the card supply is always going to be down for certain leagues and certain divisions when they're not running. So like once Europe's done, they've depleted a good chunk of their rewards for the year. So like, yes, we should still see. I say should because who knows what Sorare is going to do, because they could do any wonky stuff with this.
Sure.
But like, we should be seeing Lewandowski's, Neymar's, etc. in the summer. That's how it is expected to run. That's how it should run. At a lesser clip, right? Like there should be like one Lewandowski for every 5 Carlos Gills, because
sure,
a lot more Carlos Gills to be given away. That said, will that happen? Who knows? But yeah, like Laird said, the idea is you win rewards. So like let's say you all of a sudden you win a tier 1 in America and you get like a 0.4 card that's usable in America. Maybe you get a goalie, right? Like maybe you get Brad Guzan.
Sure.
All of a sudden Brad Guzan is totally usable to you. Or maybe you get like insert goalie from Challenger Europe and you're like, all right, I'm just going to sell this guy for 0.4 and focus elsewhere. Or you're like, all right, hey, this is a good start to my Challenger team that I'm going to be building in the coming months as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It all can snowball if these hit. I'll be honest, I'm surprised we got 2 super rares in here.
I am too. I mean, Laird went into this and he did not think we were going to have super rares. He thought there was no chance we were going to get super rares. I think we fit them pretty easily. And I think we could have even added an additional one if we wanted to. But I think it would have made our rare pool a little bit too thin if we did that. Someone asked earlier about doing like a 2.5 ETH gallery instead as like a counter to this. We could. I think the next one would probably be a higher level. The thing is, if we're doing a 2.5 ETH gallery, we would have removed basically half the cards we bought here. Like
Right.
this gallery, it just would have been, we wouldn't have played rare pro, and we wouldn't have played like, we would have bought American team and an Asian team and just sort of like tried to combine them into a global team, or we would have just not bought one of the regions. Like we probably would have bought 2 goalies. We probably would have bought 4. We probably would have bought 1 goalie, and we probably would have bought like 3 to 4 defenders, 3 to 4 mids, and a forward or 2 is what we would have done.
It looks like basically 1 goalie and the 2 super rares are about an ETH. And so that gets you down to 3.99. And if you sell another goalie, because if you're only going to play a common, like we were fully expecting to play a common in All-Star Rare, and we don't need it. But if you want to save the 0.4, like there you go.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah, because you're talking like, all right, we removed 2 goalies, boom, we're down to 4. We removed both super rares, we're down to 3.5. And then we would probably chop off some of the, like we would chop off for sure Matus in this situation. So we're down to 3. We would probably chop off a mid or 2. We would chop off a defender or 2. So like the line, the gallery would basically be like Marcinkowski and Park Ilgu. It would be like Calvo, Lovitz, Tolo, Morishige, Shoji. It would be Santos, Parks, Osmar, Yamaguchi, and it would be like Kyoto, Shibilko, Silva. Something like that is like what it would be like those like 2.5 ETH gallery. But it really goes to show like how much more like the additional funds you put in really helps increase your return, because like we just turned like 2.5 from 2.5 to 5. We have significantly increased our returns on literally everything, because we also improved that region. Like we improved the 2 we would have played, and we got ourselves into 2 more regions that we wouldn't have been able to play at 2.5. Similarly, like if we were doing a 1 ETH gallery, if we were doing a 1 ETH gallery, we would have done 1 of the goalies, we would have done 2 or 3 defenders, we would have done 2 or 3 mids, and we would have done 1 forward.
Yep.
Is what our 1 ETH, like our 1 ETH gallery would have looked like. Let's say Kim Jin-hyun, Lovitz, Morishige, Osmar Morishima, Edgar Silva. That's like what our 1 ETH gallery would have looked like.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think just to go back to like the beginning, like I think what we were saying is based on the time of year, like this is what we would do. And the 1 ETH or 2.5 ETH or 5 ETH in terms of number of players goes a little further now. Like if we're buying all the European players, when they're, essentially it's the equivalent of starting in September or maybe late August when they've had a few games. And then, these players are already cheaper, and they're going to be very much cheaper in September when people are selling them off to buy the European ones. But the ideas are the same. Like we think league stacking makes sense because it allows all of your players to usually be playing at the same time. And we did that for the most part here with MLS and J League, but like, we have a few of the K League guys sneaking in, but we would do the same thing in Europe. We probably focus on Belgium or the Netherlands or Turkey or, any of those. We absolutely stay away from Champion Europe. Yeah. But we'll get to that in another time. But
yeah, I think from a perspective of like, I think this should be very helpful for anyone realistically with a gallery of, let's say 0 to 20 ETH. I think if we went, so like 1 ETH, we just talked about what we would do if it was a 1 ETH gallery, 2.5, 5. If it was a 10, like we said, we would add some super rares, add a little bit more depth so that you're prepared. When you get to 20, I think that's when you look at U23 rare. And then I think you also look at maybe getting some more marquee level cards. Like maybe you would get in a Cecilia or someone to really help you. So like, again, like if you guys like this, let us know. We are open to doing this in the future at different price points. Like I think we could have a lot of fun with a 20 ETH gallery, a 50 ETH gallery, a 100 ETH gallery, a 500 ETH gallery. Like we could do a lot of different options like this. It could be an interesting experiment. I think it's definitely obviously more interesting at this level than like as we get bigger, it's going to be like, all right, I'm going to buy Jurian Timber. I'm going to buy Martinez. I'm going to buy Dusan Tash. I'm going to buy Lewandowski. Like this level's a lot more interesting for the masses, I think, than one of those. But we're definitely open to doing different types of galleries and at different times of the year.
Yep. And we appreciate that like 5 ETH is not a nothing amount of money for a lot of people. And so, we just thought that 5 allowed us to show a level that gets you into Rare Pro, and it helps explain why we weren't going to focus on limiteds. Like, if you look at all of this, and this is what you can compete with in the summer, if you took that money to compete with limiteds, like, you're now trying to win the best players in America and Asia with only the possibility of playing limiteds. Like, you can't play multiple levels because you can only play limiteds and limited right now. And obviously they've shown some special weeklies to have both, to kind of allow multiple scarcities, but they're special, and so we don't know how often they're going to happen. So yeah, like Sean said, please let us know if you guys want to see like a specific budget range, or we plan on doing more of these, so the timing alone will change it significantly just because of where certain seasons are. So
I think another thing that I would be open to doing, I think you would as well, is like, I would be more than happy to have people's galleries and talk through what we would do with that gallery. I think that can be helpful for people. Like, so King Kazin quickly, I do. So buying marquee level players is fine. The issue is, if you don't have depth, you're going to have injury issues, and then you're not going to have players, and you're essentially wasting the elite level players. So like, a good example from your team is looking through your gallery quickly. Like, you have a Kikuchi, which is great. Obviously a fantastic defender card. However, you have a Gen Soji super rare and a Mura super rare with a Higuchi. So using elite level players in Division 4 is kind of wasteful as rares, because rare in the rare division, because rare division is generally relatively wasteful. So the way that you have Kikuchi set up, you cannot play him in a Rare Pro lineup because of the super rares that you have, which is fine. Like, those super rares are also great, but you want to have your stuff set out and spread out a little bit differently so that you can prioritize stuff. Similar, like, you have like a Zalarian and you have a Joao Paulo and more expensive guys in America, but you don't have much support for some of the Asian guys, which might be a bit detrimental to you as well. And then you have Carlos Vela, which Laird loves, and that's just frustrating to have, unfortunately.
I thought we were off of Vela for the podcast, but I guess not.
But yeah, I'd be totally.
Yeah, we'd definitely do that. Yeah.
If someone reached out to us and like, hey, would you guys mind doing like a gallery review or overview? Like, I would totally do that. Obviously, like, we can't do much if your gallery's like 1 or 2 ETH, but if your gallery's like in the 10 to 20, 50 ETH range, like, it gives us something to talk about that we can go through and definitely give advice or thoughts that we have on that gallery.
I think we could still help on 1 ETH galleries, just because
I do, but it's more of a generic, like, what you should do process.
That's true. Yeah, that's fair. If you guys want us to touch on any of those, feel free to reach out to us. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew M. Laird. You can find Sean at PSU Fans 2, also available in some various Discords under those names. You can find me probably Lairdinho as well. Sean and I will be back in like less than 2 hours for those of you who are still watching on the stream, because we have the Florian Wirtz unique auction watch that we are going to be live streaming with Black and Quinny. So if you guys have not killed enough time already today, while many of you are at work, feel free to kill some more time by watching with us. Sean and I will be back next week with another strategy show. It will probably not be a gallery building one, but if there's anything like that you'd like us to touch on, again, feel free to reach out to us. You guys could please hit the like button below. If you're watching on YouTube, that would be very appreciative. And for those listening to the audio version, hopefully we were able to describe enough of what's been on the screens to help you get through this gallery. I'll also tweet out this final product here just so people can follow it. Maybe I'll keep track of it with one of our watch lists features that might be coming soon. So guys, thank you very much. And Sean, I'll talk to you next week.